Hello, everyone. Story 1. Eliza Monroe's terrifying encounter in Nuat. In the vast and remote expanse of the Alaskan wilderness, where the brief daylight hours yield to nights that can endure for many months, nestled a quaint community named Nuat. This small settlement lay concealed amidst the snow-blanketed pine trees, boasting a sparse population of barely 50 individuals, creating an environment where the lives and affairs of everyone were intimately known to all others. The inhabitants of this town had come to deeply embrace their inherent isolation, fully aware that once the harsh grip of winter firmly set in, relentless snowstorms possessed the power to completely cut them off for extended periods, sometimes for several weeks. Among these resilient and enduring souls resided a spirited young woman named Eliza Monroe. Having recently completed her academic journey and successfully graduated from college with a distinguished degree in environmental science, Eliza was brimming with eagerness to commence her professional career. When she was presented with a captivating research opportunity, specifically a position to delve into the profound impact of climate change upon the delicate Arctic wildlife within the expansive Alaskan tundra, she enthusiastically seized the chance. This particular employment was strategically located in Nuat, valued for its extraordinarily remote yet exquisitely pristine geographical setting, which held the dual promise of substantial professional advancement and a welcome escape from the monotonous routines of urban existence. Eliza made her arrival in Nuat during the latter part of November, precisely as the inaugural significant snowfall began its gentle descent, thoroughly blanketing the earth. The small town received her with a complex blend of intrigued curiosity and a noticeable undercurrent of skepticism. The local populace, while generally cordial, adhered to their distinct customs and did not readily welcome outsiders who might potentially disrupt the serene tranquility of their established lives. Eliza established her residence in a modest rustic cabin positioned at the very fringe of the town, a dwelling that had remained unoccupied for a considerable duration. It possessed a quaint and captivating charm, characterized by its sturdy wooden walls and a welcoming stone fireplace. Yet its location rendered it quite remote, considerably isolated from the core of the community. The locals had issued warnings to her regarding the cabin's checkered past, recounting that it had once belonged to an experienced trapper who had inexplicably vanished without any trace several decades prior. However, Eliza chose to dismiss their cautions, attributing them simply to localized superstitions. The initial few weeks dedicated to her research progressed without incident. Eliza dedicated her days to diligently gathering data from an array of various research sites, while her evenings were spent at the cabin, meticulously cataloging her compiled findings. The profound silence inherent in the wilderness was all-encompassing, interrupted solely by the mournful lament of the wind and the crisp sound of snow crunching beneath her footsteps. It was a stillness that, initially, she found profoundly peaceful. As the days progressively shortened and the nights commensurately lengthened, Eliza began to discern a series of increasingly unsettling phenomena. Peculiar noises reverberated through the towering trees during the nighttime hours, soft, barely discernible whispers that appeared to emanate from no identifiable source. She initially rationalized these sounds as mere manifestations of the wind, yet the profound disquiet they instilled within her was undeniably persistent. Her sleep became disturbed, her dreams frequently marred by obscure, amorphous shapes that shifted perpetually, accompanied by an pervasive sensation of being intently observed. On one particularly brutal evening, a ferocious blizzard descended with an unrelenting fury. The wind howled relentlessly around the cabin's sturdy frame, and the accumulating snow formed immense drifts that nearly entirely engulfed the structure. The tempest raged for several days, And throughout this period, Eliza's sense of profound isolation intensified. Her radio communications with the external world ceased entirely, effectively severing her connection from the main town. As the severe storm continued its relentless assault, Eliza distinctly heard a sound that sent a chilling sensation coursing through her veins. A rhythmic thudding against the exterior walls of the cabin, almost as if someone was deliberately knocking. She meticulously checked all the windows and doors, but no one was visible. She attempted to reassure herself that it was merely the ferocious wrath of the storm, but the peculiar noise persisted, steadily growing both louder and more insistent. One night, amidst the very climax of the storm's intensity, the electrical power supply failed completely. Eliza quickly lit candles, then huddled closely by the warmth of the fireplace. But the pervasive darkness appeared to permeate every single corner of the cabin. The rhythmic thudding became even more pronounced and drew nearer, and now, distinct scratching sounds also became audible, as if something, or indeed someone, was desperately attempting to claw its way inside. Eliza's nerves were utterly frayed. She methodically searched the entire cabin, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, yet she discovered absolutely nothing. Desperate to restore some semblance of normalcy, she resolved to contact the local emergency services number. To her utter dismay and horror, there was no response whatsoever. The telephone line was entirely dead. The storm's relentless assault continued, and with its persistence came an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Eliza began to perceive fleeting glimpses of things from the periphery of her vision. Shadowy, indistinct figures darting swiftly past the windows, momentary movements observed within the falling snow. Each succeeding night, she would hear faint whispers, guttural and utterly incoherent voices that seemed to infiltrate through the very walls of the cabin. On the fifth night of this harrowing ordeal, Eliza reached a critical decision. She could no longer remain confined within the cabin. She desperately needed to find assistance. The intensity of the storm had somewhat diminished, but the snow remained exceedingly deep and exceptionally treacherous. She bundled herself warmly and prepared to courageously brave the elements. However, as she stepped outside, she noticed something profoundly horrifying: a series of tracks encircling her cabin. These were not recognizable human footprints, but rather strange, highly irregular shapes that appeared to lead directly into the dense forest. With her heart pounding furiously, Eliza followed the mysterious tracks, clinging to the desperate hope that they would guide her to safety. The forest was enveloped in an eerie silence, and the thick snow effectively muffled the sound of her own footsteps. The tracks led her progressively deeper into the ancient woods, and soon she found herself completely surrounded by towering dark trees. The whispers intensified, now almost resembling a chilling chant, and the pervasive shadows seemed to twist and writhe ominously. In the far distance, she perceived a flickering light. Overwhelmed by desperation, she moved towards it, only to discover an ancient, desolate cabin. It bore a striking resemblance to her own, yet it was considerably older and far more dilapidated. The source of the light originated from within. Cautiously, she approached and peered through the window's grimy pane. Inside, she observed figures, faded, ethereal apparitions of individuals who appeared to belong to a bygone era. Their countenances were gaunt and hollow, and they seemed to be engaged in some form of arcane ritual, chanting in a language she could not comprehend. The intense cold seeping through the glass caused her to shiver uncontrollably, and then the stark realization struck her. These were not ordinary people, but rather tormented spirits perpetually ensnared in an unending state of profound unrest. Suddenly, a bitterly cold gust of wind swept violently through the forest, and the spectral figures abruptly turned, their vacant eyes locking directly onto Eliza's. The spirits seemed to beckon her forward with outstretched, translucent arms, their mouths contorting in silent, agonizing screams. Eliza stumbled backward, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. The snowstorm roared back to life with renewed ferocity, and the enveloping darkness seemed to close in around her. In a state of sheer panic, she fled back towards her own cabin, but the relentless storm had distorted her perception, making everything appear unfamiliar. She was hopelessly lost, disoriented, and utterly exhausted. The whispering intensified, and she could distinctly feel the cold, oppressive presence of the spirits drawing ever nearer. Just when she believed she could not endure any longer, she stumbled upon a familiar landmark. The old gnarled tree situated near her cabin. Summoning every last vestige of her remaining strength, she fought her way back, battling against the ferocious blizzard. Inside the cabin, the disturbing noises had finally ceased. Eliza meticulously locked all the doors and secured the windows, desperately attempting to calm her frantically beating heart. She understood with chilling clarity that she could not remain there for much longer. The spirits were relentless, and the storm showed no indications of abating. By the arrival of dawn, the intensity of the storm had subsided to a gentle, steady snowfall. Exhausted and feeling half-dazed from the ordeal, Eliza laboriously made her way back towards Nuat. The town itself was unnervingly quiet, with virtually no signs of normal life. The few individuals who were present seemed profoundly indifferent, their eyes distant and hollow, as if they were passively waiting for some inevitable event. Eliza recounted her terrifying experiences, but the townsfolk merely listened with a chilling, detached demeanor. They conversed in hushed, somber tones about the spirits of those who had previously perished, trapped eternally within the unforgiving wilderness due to their own profound hubris. It became unequivocally clear that Nuat was not merely a town, but rather a unique location where the delicate veil separating the realms of the living and the dead was precariously thin. Eliza departed from Nuat as swiftly as she possibly could, the harrowing experience leaving her profoundly haunted. The profound silence of the Alaskan wilderness was no longer a source of peace. It had transformed into a place of deep, unspoken terror. The snow-covered forests and isolated cabins of Alaska held profound secrets that only a select few truly comprehended, and even fewer managed to survive to narrate their chilling tales. Story 2: Dr. Aaron Cole and the Whispering Frost. Alaska, with its boundless expanses of snow-covered wilderness and its deep, enigmatic nights, had consistently captivated Dr. Aaron Cole, a dedicated ecologist and environmental researcher. He was particularly drawn by the considerable challenge of meticulously studying the Arctic wildlife and discerning the intricate effects of climate change within one of the most remote and isolated places on the entire Earth. When he received a compelling invitation to become a part of a specialized research collective within the secluded town of Cold Harbor, he enthusiastically accepted without hesitation. Cold Harbor itself was a small, weather-beaten settlement, discreetly nestled deep within the very core of the Alaskan wilderness. It was a place where the sun barely ascended above the horizon during the protracted winter months, casting the entire town in a perpetual dim twilight. With a population of just over 30 inhabitants, Cold Harbor was a closely knit community composed of rugged individuals who had masterfully adapted to the incredibly harsh and demanding environment. Aaron made his arrival in early December, precisely as the town was making its preparations for the onset of the deep winter. The ambient temperature was already significantly below freezing, and the snow had begun to accumulate in thick, heavy layers. He was met by Dr. Lydia Barnes, the distinguished head of the research collective, who was widely recognized for her unwavering dedication to the study of the Arctic's uniquely delicate ecosystem. Lydia thoroughly briefed Aaron on the comprehensive objectives of the Polaris Environmental Studies Group. These goals included closely examining the migration patterns of caribou, meticulously tracking the pervasive effects of rising temperatures on the permafrost and comprehensively documenting the subtle changes occurring within the local flora and fauna. The collective would conduct their work from a small research cabin situated several miles from the main town, a location ominously known as the Frost Haven. The Frost Haven was a robust wooden structure, specifically engineered to endure the brutal Alaskan winters. It was meticulously stocked with essential supplies and furnished with the most advanced technology available for data collection. However, its location rendered it considerably isolated, with only a solitary snowmobile trail providing the connection to Cold Harbor. The initial few days of their work progressed smoothly. Aaron and the collective diligently conducted their research, meticulously collected samples, and accurately recorded data. The days were long, filled with the often mundane tasks intrinsic to scientific inquiry, but the nights introduced a distinctly different kind of atmosphere. The unending twilight created an eerie ambiance, and the pervasive darkness seemed to play disconcerting tricks on the human mind. One evening, as the collective gathered within the cabin for their dinner, Lydia shared a local legend with Aaron. According to the town's venerable elders, a pervasive supernatural presence existed within the vast wilderness, a spectral entity known ominously as the Whispering Frost. It was purported to be the tormented spirit of a lost explorer, condemned to perpetually wander the frozen landscape, luring unsuspecting others to their tragic demise. Lydia dismissed this tale as mere folklore, yet the story lingered persistently in Aaron's thoughts, intermingling with the haunting sounds of the wind howling outside. As the weeks passed, Aaron began to observe a distinct pattern within their collected data. The caribou were exhibiting highly unusual behavior. Their traditional migration routes had significantly shifted, and there were inexplicable gaps in their documented movements. The collective also noted strange anomalies within the permafrost samples, indicative of rapid changes that did not align with existing climate models. One night, during a particularly ferocious snowstorm, Aaron and Lydia were diligently working late within the cabin when they distinctly heard a deeply unsettling noise, a rhythmic thudding, much like someone consistently tapping on the walls. Lydia casually dismissed it as merely the wind, but Aaron felt an escalating sense of profound dread. The disturbing noise persisted, steadily growing both louder and more erratic until it abruptly ceased. The following morning, Aaron discovered a distinct set of tracks leading away from the cabin. They were large, highly irregular footprints, considerably too big to belong to any known animal. The tracks led directly to the edge of a nearby frozen lake, but there was no discernible sign of anything beyond that point. As the nights grew progressively darker and colder, the mysterious phenomena became even more disturbing. The whispers began anew, growing louder and more insistent. Aaron would awaken in the dead of night, utterly convinced he heard disembodied voices calling his name, only to find the cabin completely empty and silent. One evening, Lydia and Aaron decided to meticulously investigate the frozen lake, earnestly hoping to uncover clues about the strange tracks. The lake itself was a vast, expansive sheet of ice, its surface remarkably smooth and entirely unbroken. They diligently set up monitoring equipment in the area, but initially found nothing out of the ordinary until the sun eventually set. As the oppressive darkness descended, the whispers returned, now far more pronounced and alarmingly coherent. They appeared to emanate from directly beneath the thick ice. Aaron's flashlight beam sliced through the intense darkness, revealing strange, swirling patterns just beneath the frozen surface. It was as if something was constantly moving, just out of clear sight, and the whispers intensified, forming discernible words in a language they found utterly incomprehensible. The mounting tension reached its absolute peak when Lydia inexplicably vanished one morning. She was simply gone. Her bed remained untouched, and her essential gear was missing. Aaron became frantic, thoroughly searching the cabin and the entire surrounding area, but there was no indication of her presence. He reported her disappearance to Cold Harbor authorities, but despite extensive search efforts, nothing was yielded. As Aaron persistently continued his investigation, he uncovered an old, leather-bound journal hidden away in the cabin's attic. It had belonged to a former occupant, an explorer who had mysteriously disappeared years prior. The journal meticulously detailed experiences strikingly similar to his own. Strange, inexplicable noises, unsettling visions, and a progressively intensifying sense of dread. The final entries were largely incoherent, but they ominously mentioned a hidden place situated beneath the ice where the malevolent Whispering Frost resided. Determined to locate Lydia, Aaron returned to the frozen lake. He employed an ice auger to meticulously drill through the surface, fervently hoping to uncover whatever lay hidden beneath. The created hole revealed a concealed chamber filled with an eerie, softly glowing mist. Aaron descended into the chamber and discovered a series of ancient carvings and intricate symbols, depicting scenes of individuals seemingly trapped within the ice. As he intensely studied the ancient carvings, Aaron felt a profoundly cold presence envelop him entirely. The whispers became deafeningly loud, and he suddenly comprehended that the Whispering Frost was not merely a spirit, but a malevolent, formless force that ensnared souls within the ice, relentlessly feeding off their fear and profound despair. The carvings served as a chilling record of all those who had tragically fallen victim to this terrifying entity, including Lydia. Aaron barely managed to escape the chamber, the whispers growing even louder and more aggressively menacing. The ice beneath him seemed to shift precariously, and the chamber itself began to collapse around him. He struggled his way back to the surface, only to find the cabin in a state of disarray and the storm raging more furiously than ever before. In the climactic confrontation, Aaron directly faced the Whispering Frost itself. It manifested as a formless, shadowy entity that appeared to absorb all the cold and darkness surrounding it. The entity's presence was utterly suffocating, and the whispers transformed into a cacophony of tormented voices. Aaron realized with grim certainty that to escape, he had to directly confront the entity. Drawing upon his remaining reserves of strength, Aaron utilized a flare gun to project an intense burst of heat and blinding light, hoping to repel the entity. The Whispering Frost recoiled sharply, its shadowy form twisting and distorting violently as the flare burned brightly. The entity seemed to dissolve, its whispers gradually fading into the raging storm. Aaron miraculously managed to reach Cold Harbor, utterly exhausted and deeply traumatized. He reported the harrowing events to the townsfolk, but they listened with a complex blend of skepticism and evident fear. The local elders spoke of a long-standing curse intrinsically tied to the lake, a place where the precarious boundary between the living and the dead was perilously thin. Although Aaron's incredible story was met with considerable doubt, he knew the profound truth of what he had encountered. The Whispering Frost was an insidiously dark force that preyed upon those who dared to venture too close to the ominous secrets hidden beneath the ice. He departed from Cold Harbor carrying a profound and lasting respect for the inherent dangers of the Alaskan wilderness, and a deep-seated fear of the frozen echoes that continued to linger ominously in the surrounding darkness. Story 3. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell at the Aurora Climate Preservation Project. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell was by no means a stranger to the wild, untamed expanses of Alaska. As an experienced climatologist, she had bravely navigated many of the world's harshest and most challenging environments in her persistent pursuit of scientific knowledge. However, when she received an invitation to join a high-priority research initiative situated in a profoundly remote area of Alaska, specifically a location known as the Aurora Climate Preservation Project, she felt an inexplicable shiver that was a mixture of both eager excitement and profound trepidation. The Aurora Climate Preservation Project was strategically located deep within the Alaskan wilderness, considerably distant from any semblance of civilization and widely recognized for its extreme isolation. This particular initiative was a collaborative undertaking, a joint venture between several leading environmental organizations. Meticulously focused on studying the intricate effects of accelerated climate change on ancient ice formations and rare indigenous flora. The very remote nature of the location, however, brought with it its own unique set of formidable challenges and inherent dangers. Upon her arrival in late October, Eleanor was greeted by a dedicated team of researchers whose efforts were meticulously overseen by the enigmatic Dr. Victor Kane. The research station itself comprised a collection of prefabricated structures expertly designed to endure the incredibly harsh Alaskan winters. The team was composed of highly skilled experts in a diverse range of fields, all singularly dedicated to the overarching mission at hand. The days were remarkably short, with the sun barely managing to ascend above the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the snow-covered landscape. The initial few weeks at the Aurora Climate Preservation Project proceeded precisely according to plan. The team diligently collected ice core samples, meticulously tracked the dynamic movement of glaciers, and systematically cataloged unusual plant species. However, as November progressed, a series of strange occurrences began to gradually unsettle the team. The station's critical communication system started to experience intermittent failures. The radio would frequently crackle with static interference, and the satellite internet connection proved to be highly unreliable. On particularly tumultuous, stormy nights, the staff would distinctly hear faint, ghostly voices through the pervasive static. But these unsettling sounds were initially dismissed as mere interference. One evening, Eleanor observed an unusual phenomenon. While meticulously inspecting the ice cores, she discovered samples that appeared to contain inexplicable artifacts. Small, ancient-looking carvings deeply embedded within the ice itself. The carvings were intricately detailed, depicting unknown symbols and scenes that appeared to be ancient rituals or profound ceremonies. When she showed these peculiar findings to Victor, he became visibly uneasy, yet he quickly dismissed them as merely natural inclusions within the ice. As winter deepened, the profound isolation of the station intensified. The team's collective mood grew increasingly tense, and their interactions became noticeably strained. One night, during an exceptionally fierce blizzard, Dr. Sarah Lee, a distinguished geologist on the team, went missing. She had been out collecting samples but never returned. Despite a thorough search effort and the worsening storm conditions, there was absolutely no trace of her. The inexplicable disappearance of Sarah dramatically intensified the team's pervasive paranoia. Wild accusations flew amongst them, and everyone's nerves were utterly frayed. Victor's behavior became progressively more erratic. He would frequently retreat to his private quarters, emerging only to harshly berate the team for their perceived lack of progress. Eleanor, becoming increasingly concerned for her own personal safety, began to meticulously investigate the strange carvings she had previously found embedded within the ice. She pored over the research materials and ancient journals found within the station's extensive library, searching for any reference to similar symbols or unsettling phenomena. Her rigorous search led her to an old, chilling account of an expedition from the early 1900s that had ventured into the very same area and had mysteriously vanished. The journal entries spoke of eerie occurrences and a mysterious, powerful force that seemed to be intrinsically connected to the ancient ice. As December approached, the blizzards grew more frequent and considerably more severe. Eleanor and the remaining team members became even more isolated. The station's electrical power supply grew increasingly unreliable, and the constant whiteout conditions rendered it utterly impossible to venture outside for any sustained length of time. One night, Eleanor was abruptly awakened by a loud, profoundly unsettling noise emanating from the storage shed. She investigated and found nothing immediately unusual, but the pervasive sense of unease lingered persistently. Over the subsequent few days, she began to experience vivid, disturbing dreams of shadowy figures and ancient, arcane rituals being performed in the snow. These dreams left her with a profound and lasting sense of dread. One morning, Eleanor discovered strange markings etched around the station, symbols that bore a striking resemblance to those she had previously observed in the ice samples. They were deeply etched into the snow, forming a perfect circle around the entire perimeter of the station. The symbols appeared to glow faintly in the dim light, and their presence filled Eleanor with a deep and overwhelming sense of foreboding. The team's collective mental state rapidly deteriorated. Paranoia became widespread as they grew convinced that someone or something was deliberately trying to drive them to madness. Accusations of sabotage and betrayal became commonplace among them. Victor's behavior grew even more erratic, and he would frequently disappear for extended periods of time. One night, Eleanor witnessed something truly horrifying. While on a late-night patrol, she observed Victor standing entirely alone in the swirling blizzard, chanting incoherent phrases and holding a flickering lantern. The lantern cast eerie, dancing shadows on the pristine snow, and Victor's eyes appeared to be glazed over with a strange, otherworldly light. When she cautiously approached him, he snapped out of his trance, but he was completely unable to recall what had transpired. The tension reached its absolute zenith when another team member, Dr. Ian Roberts, inexplicably vanished. The remaining researchers were on edge, their trust in each other utterly shattered. Eleanor began to strongly suspect that Victor might be concealing something significant, but her attempts to confront him were consistently met with open hostility. Eleanor's relentless investigation led her to an old, hidden section of the station's archives, where she discovered a series of confidential reports and highly sensitive documents. These reports meticulously detailed the history of the Aurora Climate Preservation Project and its previous occupants. The documents spoke of a series of tragic events and inexplicable disappearances that were linked to a local legend about the frozen echoes, ancient malevolent entities inherently bound to the ice that mercilessly preyed on the minds of those who dared to disturb their domain. According to the reports, the frozen echoes were malevolent spirits that perpetually haunted the ice, drawn inexorably to those who ventured too close. They were said to induce vivid hallucinations and drive individuals to profound madness, relentlessly feeding off their fear and despair. The carvings Eleanor had previously discovered were symbols that had been used by early explorers in a desperate attempt to placate these terrifying entities. With the team's dwindling numbers and Victor's behavior becoming increasingly erratic and dangerous, Eleanor knew with certainty that she had to act quickly and decisively. She directly confronted Victor, demanding immediate answers. He then confessed that he had been clandestinely conducting secret experiments in an attempt to communicate with the frozen echoes, believing he could harness their immense power for groundbreaking scientific breakthroughs. However, his perilous experiments had gone horribly awry, tragically unleashing the malevolent forces upon them. Victor's shocking confession was abruptly interrupted by a series of violent tremors that profoundly shook the entire station. The electrical power went out, plunging the station into complete darkness. The frozen echoes had become far more aggressive, their pervasive influence spreading rapidly through the ice and snow. Eleanor resolved to take decisive action. Armed with the critical knowledge gleaned from the old reports, she performed a powerful ritual based on the ancient symbols she had discovered, fervently hoping to banish the frozen echoes and protect the remaining survivors. The ritual involved a complex series of incantations and specific offerings designed to appease the malevolent spirits and effectively close the portal they had inadvertently opened. As she diligently performed the ritual, the entire station was engulfed in an otherworldly, bone-chilling cold. The frozen echoes visibly manifested as shadowy, wailing figures that swirled menacingly around the station, their whispers growing louder and far more insistent. Eleanor bravely fought to maintain her focus, steadfastly continuing the ritual despite the overwhelming fear and the freezing temperatures that permeated the air. The ritual reached its dramatic climax as Eleanor completed the final incantation. A blinding light erupted from the ancient symbols, and the frozen echoes were violently forced back into the ice. The station's temperature gradually stabilized, and the oppressive, suffocating atmosphere noticeably lifted. In the aftermath of the terrifying ordeal, the remaining team members were found in a profound state of shock, but thankfully they were alive. Victor had tragically succumbed to the overwhelming influence of the frozen echoes and was discovered unconscious, his mind severely fractured. The team was subsequently evacuated from the Aurora Climate Preservation Project, and the station itself was permanently closed and sealed off from access. Eleanor returned to civilization, forever marked by the horrific experiences she had faced. The entire ordeal left her deeply shaken, and she carried the heavy weight of the frozen echo's lingering influence with her. The chilling story of the Aurora Climate Preservation Project became a stark, cautionary tale about the inherent dangers of meddling with forces that lie far beyond human comprehension and the harsh, unforgiving realities of the vast Alaskan wilderness. By